Circumstances do not make a man, they reveal him. Dr. Wayne Dyer. Now, for those of y'all who watch my videos regularly, you're probably scratching your head and saying, oh, wait a minute. About 3 months ago or so, he started off a video with that very same quote. Yes, I did. And I'm revisiting that quote today for several reasons. One has to do with creativity, and the other has to do with synchronicity. Creativity, the way creativity works, according to an article I read way back in the early 90s in the Science of Mind magazine, you just put a bunch of information in there and you let it incubate and all of it comes out. Now that really works if you're working on a project, if you're wondering about something, what does something mean, and you're researching and you're finding what everyone else thinks about, and you go to bed and you wake up and all of a sudden, voila. And then it's another thing when ideas just come to you, and this is what happened to me about 3 days ago or so. I was out biking out here, and that statement made me realize just how wrong it is, how inaccurate it is, although it makes a very good point, which is of course what my other video was about, how important our thoughts are, how important our perceptions are. And of course I went into that movie Mind Walk where Sonia was saying it's a crisis of perception, right? Yes, I agree 1,000%. Watch my other video, I'll put a link down below. That yes, it's you know, it's how we react, it's how we respond to the things that happen to us that really reveal who we are. And you know what it reveals? It reveals what kind of circumstances we've had. So circumstances do make a man. And so do our interpretations, our perceptions of that, how we react to it. You can't negate one or the other. We are the sum of our experiences. We are the sum of our circumstances. In fact, to say it's not what goes in and what comes out is all along the same lines, that's not accurate either. To not think that what goes in affects us is ridiculous. Of course it does. What comes out, that affects us too. So these statements aren't 100% accurate. And I might be a little anal, but I don't think so. Some might look at it that way. But it reminds me of a friend of mine back in college days. Actually, it was during the summer in between break. I would take off in the summer and go work and save up some money for my college. And got to befriend the guy a year ahead of me, top of the class guy. And that's a pretty good accomplishment. We had a real big high school, about 2,500 people in 3 grades. So to be number one says a lot. Anyway, I got to know the guy one of the summers in between break. We were both going off to college and was back home during the summer break working, and became good friends of his. And I remember I made a comment one time, and I can't even begin to think of what it might have been. But he pointed out to me, John, you're not being explicit enough. You got to make sure you say things perfectly so that people understand and they won't go one way or the other. So I've been conscious of that ever since then. Excuse me. And now I can pick apart a statement like that circumstances don't make us. And of course, in the other video, I used the story that's used quite often with even Anthony Robbins in Awaken the Giant Within. He talks about the 2 brothers that had a horrible father that had to be taken away from. He was a criminal, and they both went to different foster families. And they were interviewed later in life, and they said, why'd you turn out the way you are? You're just like your dad, you're not. And they both gave the same answer. Well, look at my dad, what do you expect? Okay, well, one didn't want to be like him and one emulated him, which is what usually happens in most cases. When you see prejudice and bigotry, you can pretty much guarantee they learn that from their parents. So circumstances really do make us. And then many times when we react, it's a reflection of a circumstance in the past. I did another video, I'll put a link down below for that one, explaining how we get upset because of a circumstance in the past and a circumstance in the present, and how the present circumstance reminds us of a past circumstance. And we were back to childhood, and we act like a little child and throw a little temper tantrum when this happens to us. Someone push our buttons. And it had nothing to do with really what was going on. It's just triggers a past hurt experience that you had. But it's important to understand that everything we do affects us. And how we interpret those are powerful. Our thoughts are powerful. Thoughts are real. And we can't discount how important they are. But they're in that first stage of knowledge. It's really the things we do or have done to us that matter. And that's where those circumstances are at. That's in the action box. The things we do and have done to us. And this is so important for us to understand if we want to make this world a better place. Because it's really easy to get tricked into what I refer to as spiritual mumbo jumbo, where the intentions are really good. And it reminds me a lot of these books, and there are myriad of them, Living with Lupus, or Living with This Shit Condition. How do you live in this hell that we're living in? Well, that's what a lot of Eastern philosophy does. There is no right or wrong. There is no suffering. Just accept it the way it is. Don't stress out over it. That's how you live in hell. I don't want to live in hell. That's poppycock to not realize there is a difference between pleasure and pain. That's the whole purpose of my special teaching tool. 3 stages of knowledge, 2 ordered pairs, and then polar opposites. These are the only 2 forms of 2-value logic we need to understand in order to solve problems. And what happens with what I refer to as that spiritual mumbo jumbo is they delve into one of the many other pairs of 2s that are available. Now, I remember when I created my special teaching tool. I'll bore y'all for a second. And I wanted to look at some things I was reluctant to because I knew they'd be big projects. And I've talked about this before in other videos. Where I took on the I Ching, I wanted to see if I could find a flaw in it. I found it right away. Then I went to go at Aristotle, and I said, okay, he's supposed to be the father of logic, and I see all these criticisms of Aristotle, that he was a fool, he didn't understand anything. So I went and looked at him. I said, oh, I can't wait to punch some holes in Aristotle. And when I looked at him, I realized we had done exactly the same thing. We had a whole bunch of groups of 2s. You know, where is this? Is this the same thing? Is this a group? Is this in the same group? And that's what he had done. So I was really excited when I studied Aristotle. I go, oh my God, I can't punch a hole in it because we've done exactly the same thing. Y'all see my file on groups of 2s. I have all these different ways of where 2s fit into. You know, are they the same? Are they saying the same thing? Can we get tricked and fooled when we talk about duality and then not realize the significance of this special teaching tool I created that started out with the cause and effect, pleasure and pain quadrant system? These are the 2 forms of 2-value logic we're born with. We need to understand to solve problems. We're living systems. We're subject to the law of cause and effect. People get into the spirituality of things, and it's not the same thing. We're going back to the first stage once again. We have to understand that we're not spirits. In this world right now, that's still part of us, and I'm not negating it or downplaying it. I'm saying that now as living systems are subject to the law of cause and effect. We need to understand this and use it. And what do you hear from spiritual mumbo-jumboers? Duality fades into the oneness of everything. Oh, that one really gets me, man. That's so tricky. It sounds so good, doesn't it? Duality fades into the oneness of everything. What is duality? Pleasure and pain, suffering. No, there is no suffering. Bullshit, there is 2. And the purpose of this existence is not to come here and suffer so that we have some sort of spiritual awareness. That's poppycock. My God, don't get sucked into that garbage. The only purpose suffering has is to wake us up that we're making mistakes. We got to stop doing it. And then if you've experienced this, yes, you got to turn those lemons into lemonade. You read any self-help book and you're going to hear the same thing over and over. They all understand that we can create a purpose out of suffering. We can turn an obstacle into a positive, and that's what you have to do. And I did a video especially on this, talking about the difference between an ordeal and a adventurous attitude. And I talked about Rudy T, the Rockets coach, who had the best attitude ever. Every time he turned around, he was making lemonade. He never let a lemon get to him. So if you've had a problem, if you've suffered, there's some purpose you can get out of that by helping other people not suffer. That's the purpose, and that's where every self-help book is going to tell you what to do. You had that pain and suffering, you figured it out, now you get to go around and help others who are doing it. That's what the hero's journey is all about. But it's about taking responsibility, understanding that we have to realize it's what we're doing and things done to us. And that most of the problems we end up are the things we're doing to ourselves. So, yes, circumstances do determine who we are. It's the sum of all of our experiences. When I first got into this long ago, I remember reading something that Anthony Robbins said about every problem can be traced back to our behavior, and he gave all these examples, and wow, he nailed it. In fact, I did a special video on Awaken the Giant Within. I took his 500-page book and mathematically coded it and turned it into a 29-step process. I'll put a link down below on that. But it all starts with changing our behavior. That's the key. And for me, before I even read his book, I was already thinking all those terms, and I came up with 6 main factors that affect our behavior. The big one is our past moments. That's the sum of all of our experiences. That's where all those circumstances are that do make who we are, in addition to how we dealt with it. It's not just what happens, it's more important. That's why that's a good point. So Wayne Dyer makes a good point. He drives home that point. It's not the circumstances. It's not the circumstances that happen. It reveals them. When they have an experience, you can tell what kind of experience they had or other past experiences. But if you're going to say this more accurately, you should say, well, that circumstances make us, and then our interpretations also make us, and can reveal past circumstances. So we have all these past moments, and the problem with us, it's limited. So people always throw the free will card in at you. Oh, we got free will. But our free will is limited to those darn experiences. And for most of us, we don't have the knowledge of how to live. So we don't have free will. We don't know how to live in paradise. How can you choose something you don't even know exists? The vast majority of people don't even know what I talk about on my channel when I'm not digressing off the subjects like this, when I'm more specific about how to get healthy. So it's limited. And then we've got the current moment itself. So past moments, current moment, and that's what gets us in trouble. Every time we turn around, we got a chance to make another mistake, don't we? We got to be vigilant about making sure we're always making the right choices in the current moment. And then I have 4 current status factors. And you see this every culture you see. They have that same 4 hierarchy. They all affect one another. You can't separate one from the other. Whatever we do to one affects all the others. And what happens with spiritual mumbo jumbo, when you got the physical, mental, emotional, and what I call communal, other people call spiritual, or that's where some people's religions are at. When you look at people who get into these belief systems, it's all about the spiritual, not realizing the foundation, the base of us is really the most important factor. Oh no, the top is the most important. Yeah, but what happens when you got a base that ain't worth the crap? Oh, but look at them, they're saints and their base is like shit. Well, imagine what would happen if their base wasn't a bunch of crap. You ever think of that one? Oh, well, they wouldn't have had the motivation to be better. You have to suffer to be a good person. Is that the rationale behind this? So, duality fades into the oneness of everything. That's poppycock. That's not how it works. Duality is two-value logic, polar opposites. Our brains are wired for pleasure and pain. It's part of our feedback system. Don't you see? And then when you look at the oneness of everything, that doesn't have anything to do with it with one another. This is how they trick you. Polar opposites, duality, the whole Eastern philosophy, there's no right or wrong. Don't look at cause and effect. We'll use that in karma instead. That's two-value logic. The oneness of everything is not one-value logic. So if you're going to compare duality with something, you don't compare it with the oneness of everything. There's no comparison. You compare two-value logic to one-value logic. And what is one-value logic? God said so. That's one-value logic. Two-value logic, polar opposites. Pleasure, pain, positive effect, negative effect. Negative effect, oh, there's no such thing as pleasure and pain. Everything's just the way it's supposed to be. It's part of our spiritual progress to come here and suffer. Oh, no, man. You're being tricked into accepting the horrible world we live in when they do that. Living with lupus, living in hell. I agree, we got to plant our garden no matter where we're at. But if we don't realize we're in hell, we're not going to want to get out. So duality does not fade into the oneness of everything. If we're talking about two different things, when we go back to the oneness of everything, there is no duality. Because there is no pleasure and pain. There is no living system that's subject to the law of cause and effect. There is no matter that's subject to Newton's third law of motion, the law of action and reaction. It's only when formless energy steps down a level, and when it does, light is admitted. Oh, light and dark. Again, don't get tricked with all these ways that we can group twos. There's only two groups of twos we need to worry about. Polar opposites, cause and effect, pleasure and pain, warning sign, feedback system, making a mistake, what is it? Fall of mankind, cooking our food, eating animals, eating plants we're not biologically adapted to eat, eating processed foods, using chemicals to grow our food and genetically modify them. Those are mistakes, we're not supposed to do it. And that's where the focus of our life should be right now. Because most of us don't have this information. Most of us have no free will. Because our free will is limited by our experiences, by those circumstances. And for some of us, can be limited to their imagination and their ability to conceptualize. And since I have both those traits, I can understand how I might have a little more free will than others. Got a good imagination. Not everyone has those personality traits and perceives the world differently. My friends, be careful about mumbo jumbo. Be careful about anything that takes away your responsibility. Be careful about anybody who doesn't help you understand what is the mistake that we have to make so we don't have to suffer. All these other belief systems are tricking us into accepting the hell we live in, because it is hell. It's not easy. And that's why a lot of people just shut their brain off and don't entertain it. Ignorance is bliss for many for a reason. And that's mainly because people feel helpless when they don't have a solution, and that's where a lot of people are. They don't have the knowledge we're talking about here, and they don't know there's a solution. So even if they hear something bad about the psychopaths who rule the world, they don't want to know about it because they don't realize that the solution for us to get healthy is a solution to defeat this dark aspect of our behavior. But no, we're tricked and fooled by some really clever people who've infiltrated our belief systems. And they tell us that we're born of sin. Nothing you can do about the dark side of your behavior. It was something that happened long ago, just part of who you are. Face up to it. No, that's not what happened. Every culture on this planet says at one time we had a golden age. And then something happened. We made a mistake. Now we live in the dark ages. And whenever you try to have conversations with people about this, they can't seem to understand, some of them, that you got to get into that second stage of knowledge, where those circumstances are at, where those things we do are at, where those things that have been done to us are at. That's what matters. Because the second stage to the third stage, the cause and effect, that's a law. Can't violate it. There are laws of nature. Get on the roof and jump off the roof. I know where you're going to end up every time. You're going to be on the ground. You might want to argue, some of y'all, whether it's magnetism or gravity. Doesn't matter. We know the results. Oh, but it does matter. I don't want to go there. In fact, I kind of wish some of y'all would stop going there. Because it doesn't make any difference. Oh, John, but you can't change 9/11. You can't change the JFK assassination. You shouldn't focus on things you can't change. Exactly. But the main thing is you don't want to waste your time researching a topic that doesn't make any difference. When you understand what happened with JFK, when you understand the real truth about history, you realize there's a lesson to be learned. And there is something we can change. We can take back control over certain things that are being used to control us. Number one, money. So it's important to understand 9/11 because that helps us understand the bogus war on terror. That's an endless war that can never be won. And to understand that, you have to understand who's ruling the world and what their MO is. It's always divide and conquer. In wars, they're number one way to do it. You got to be aware of that. So, the worst war of all is this war on terror. It's taking away our freedoms. There's something we can do about that. We can recognize the truth of what happened and the purpose behind it and undo all these unjust laws that have been placed on Americans that are taking away our liberties. Because that's what this is really all about. It's not a left and right question. It's whether it's about liberty or being controlled. So, I agree. You don't want to waste time on things that happened in the past unless there's a lesson to be learned from it. But the main thing is don't waste your time on topics that don't make any difference. Oh, but it fits here and here and here. Doesn't matter. Doesn't change anything. But understanding the absolute tool of control is something that we all need to understand so we can do something about it. And of course, most importantly, we got to go upstream. And you know what that entails? Satisfying all of our needs. So, any belief system that doesn't help you understand how important our needs are relative to our problems, and they want to try to help you be a better person and focus on higher virtues, you have to understand what Tolstoy figured out. There's a order, a hierarchy of these steps. There's an order we have to take to get up to the second level. According to Tolstoy in his essay, The First Step. I'll put a link down below. It's a fascinating essay where he explained that the problem we have as a species, it's all about self-control. Gluttony. Got to fast. You got to take back control over things that are controlling us. That's where it begins. Everything else is an offshoot from that. So it's not what goes in, it's what comes out. Wrong. Circumstances don't make a man, they reveal him. Wrong. It's the circumstances and the way we interpret it that matters. It's what goes in and what comes out that matters. Most importantly, my friends, it's what's going in us, and what's going in is wrong. Our foundation, our base, is shaky and weak. And all four of those current status factors I mentioned, the physical, mental, emotional, and communal, or spiritual, all affect one another. Can't negate that. It doesn't work. And it all begins with the base. It all begins with whether or not we have the right knowledge to begin with so we can have a good choice. And most of us don't start our journey off in life that way, do we? A lot of us, luckily, we're finding out the truth about how to live, how to eat. Make sure you get sunshine, exercise, sleep. Our thoughts are huge. Our feelings are huge. The community, the spiritual component of all of us is huge. Oh, John, the fall, it's spiritual, it's physical, it's biological. Of course. But when you look at the fall, you have to understand 3 stages of knowledge. So if you're going to talk about these things, understand the 3rd stage, or the 3 stages. Understand that the only thing that's of any significance right now is to find out what's happening in the 2nd stage. What are we doing that has put us down in the hell we're in? And it's the cooking of our food. Everything else prior to that, whether it's mental, emotional, or spiritual, are factors we need to understand, but the physical is where it all begins. That's where we're making a mistake. So circumstances do make us, and most importantly, it's how we interpret those. You can't negate both of them. You have to look at the big picture. And that includes understanding that we have 2 groups of needs. And I explained in my last video, I'm going to start explaining this in all of my videos. I'm not going to go into detail about all of these. Always remember I have 2 playlists you guys can go to. The Ultimate Solution playlist and the Ultimate Schematic playlist. that explains all these things in detail. So if you don't know what the 2 groups of needs are, go to the Ultimate Solution playlist, 11-part video series, read the description parts, and you'll see where I talk about the 2 groups of needs. You just copy and paste that into another file, Control F, or even Control F on the page you're on. Type in 2 groups of needs, you'll find it. You go to that video, I explain it. Again, I'm going to start doing this more often from here on out. I get a lot of comments from people that are watching my videos for the first time, and they don't know what I'm talking about, and I always don't go into detail on every video. Although I spent so much time explaining that, I could have went into detail on it. So, begin to ramble. It's time for me to go. I'll get back. I've got an appointment. I've got to meet with somebody here in just a second. So I got to head out. And remember, stay positive. We're on the hero's journey. It's an exciting journey. From here on out, you're going to have new experiences, new circumstances where you're going to be spiritual runners for people. And it's so exciting when you can find someone who's ready for this information. And don't let it get to you. Keeping in mind that most people aren't ready for this message. 3 ways of heroes. We're the trim tabs here on my channel, and we're out there trying to find other trim tabs. And I guarantee you, when you are surrounded by trim tabs, guess what happens? I don't even have to say it, do I? You're in for a treat.